Well, thanks for coming. My name is Dan Inman. I've been a professor since 1980. This is my third career. So I was a little older when I started my academic career. Did a couple other things before that. The title is the best job in the world because I absolutely think it is. And so my task today is to convince you that it's the best job in the world and give you something to target when you graduate. So when you graduate, you have a lot of opportunities to do things. One of the ways to think about being a professor is that it's the best of both worlds. So you have the freedom, intellectual freedom and time freedom of somebody who owns their own company. You have that complete freedom. So mostly people own small companies, and the small companies don't have very good benefits and they don't have very good job security. But you have the job security and benefits of working for a large company if you're an academic. So it has really the best of those two extremes of being self-employed and working for a large company. Next thing I'd like to do is just point out some differences here. So if you have a PhD, you sort of have three choices when you graduate. You can become an academic, which I highly recommend. You can go to work for a government lab, which is not too bad, or you can work for industry. And so what are the differences? Well, the pay actually is best in a major university. It's not best if you go to a community college or if you go to a four-year college. But in a major university, if you're a successful professor, you can make a whole bunch of money. I'd tell you how much, but it's recorded, so I don't want to tell you. But I make a lot of money. I make more money than my colleagues in government labs and my colleagues at companies. Years ago, when I was maybe about 8 years out, or 7 years out, I had a friend who made friends with a guy who owned a small company called Kistler Instruments, which makes accelerometers and that sort of thing. And one night we were eating dinner, and it just dawned on me that I made more money than he did, which was really a surprise. Because when I started this position in 1980, professors didn't make very much money at all. So it was kind of interesting. In fact, my first job offers with a PhD were Sandia National Labs, Bell Labs, and I don't know who's, let me turn this off. It's my graduate students asking where I am, you know. And the Bell Labs job and the industry job paid about 30% more than the university job. But being stupid, I took the university job anyway. And now it's the other way around. I think academia pays about 30% more than government jobs or industry. Of course, there are exceptions. If you become CEO of Pratt & Whitney or Boeing Corporation, you'll make more money than a professor. But to do technical work, you'll make more money in a university than you would anyplace else. So freedom of time. You get lots of freedom of time. And by that I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I have things I have to do. If it's a day I teach, I have to teach that class. If I have a meeting, I have to go to that meeting. But basically, the rest of the time, I get to decide what I do with that time. And you don't have that in any other field. You don't have it in a government lab. You don't have it in industry. In government labs, you get some freedom of time because they're a little looser. But in companies, you're going to have to essentially sign a timesheet. And it's not like punching a clock like a worker on an assembly line, but you do have to account for your time. You don't have a timesheet, you have to fill it out. If any of you have done work study stuff or worked as an undergraduate in the lab, you have to fill out a timesheet. But professors don't fill out timesheets, so that's a nice freedom. I know when I interviewed for jobs after I got my PhD, I interviewed a lot of companies, and that's one of the things that really put me off because I'd been working on my PhD, and when you work on your PhD, it's sort of a 24/7 thing. You don't think about what time it is or how much effort you put into it. And then all of a sudden, this guy's telling me, well, we have flex hours here. You can work 37.5 hours, and you can do it all on Monday through Wednesday or through Friday, Thursday, and then take Friday off or whatever. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Anyway, choice of what to work on. You have complete choice of what to work on. If I wake up in the morning and I decide I want to study chemistry, I can do that. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but I could do that. So given, you know, I've been at this almost 40 years, so, sorry, 36 years. So I can tell you I've worked on a lot of different projects, and many of them had nothing to do with what I got my PhD on. At first, a lot of it had to do with my PhD, but then I saw this area and I went that way, and I saw that area and I went that way, and you know, you can just, if you see stuff you like, you can go after it and do it. So that's something you can't do in a company. Somebody's always telling you what to work on, period. So it's great. You know, you get your first job, you like controls, you're in a controls group, and then the company changes a little bit, and there's not so much controls work, and so they're going to tell you, okay, today you're going to work on structures, or you're going to work on aerodynamics, or you're going to work on this. So you don't have a choice. In a government lab, you get some choice. It's not completely like a company because they have a little bit more longevity. So a lot of the people, my colleagues who are in government labs, they work on the same, you know, on things that they like for a while. Youthful influence, okay. You don't get any in these companies, in these situations, but at university, this youthful influence is awesome. It's one of the reasons I love being in a university. I'm 70 years old, and I feel young all the time because I'm always talking to young people. The other thing that's great about youth is you don't know what you can't do. So you get to solve problems that people think you can't solve because you don't know you can't solve them. So my graduate students come in and we talk, we have ideas, and wow, something great happens. That's why companies like SpaceX are doing so well, is because they're full of youthful people. At some point, they'll grow out of that. But right now, they're full of really youthful people, and they get lots of excitement. So I learn as much from you guys as you learn from me. Which isn't much, because you probably don't learn anything from me, but you haven't even had many classes. But basically, this influence is incredible. It really is just something that makes you feel good every day, talking to young people. I know it's hard to appreciate because you're all young and you think, who wants to talk to the guy next to me, you know? But it's great. Travel. Okay, I love to travel. And there's no better place to do that than the university professor. Now, I have to raise the money to do that, but it's pretty easy to do. I've been all over the world. Since January, I've been in California 3 times, Florida twice, Houston once, and Abu Dhabi once. And I'm going to Purdue in a couple of weeks. Got a little bit let down, but I'll be there. So you get to see the world, essentially, and you don't have to join the Army to do that. So that's kind of thing. Boredom, okay. I have never been bored in this job. Never. Okay, so maybe some nights when I'm grading homework, I get a little bored. But and I'll tell you the downside in a minute. Government labs, you can get some boredom because sometimes you have to do things because you're in a government lab. You have to do things you're told to do. And that's usually when boredom sets in. It's when you have to do something you don't want to do. And I don't know if you've noticed that. You've taken 5 classes maybe, or 3 classes, and someday you're pretty enthusiastic about solving, I don't know, aeroelasticity problem or something. And some days it doesn't look so good to you. So you work on your controls project and that looks better. So that happens. That's sort of human nature. You kind of get tired of things. So one of the great things about being a professor is you get to work on a lot of different projects at the same time. And that's why I never get bored. So if I get tired of working on control theory, then I can just switch to aerodynamics, or I can switch to aeroelasticity, or I can look at birds, for instance, which I've been doing a lot lately. It's kind of interesting. So that's sort of what I look at as the differences. Now, having said that, and granted I'm trying to paint the best picture possible as being a professor, each of these jobs has some downsides too. What are the downsides for being a professor for me? Grading. I absolutely hate grading. I don't like grading. I don't mind grading the problems. I just hate assigning a grade. And I also hate grading problems if I've got 100 of them to grade, 20 is about my limit, and then I get bored. But that's probably one of the downsides. Sometimes in a university life as a faculty member, everything's done as a volunteer. So you have your classes you're assigned to, and that's it. And then everything else you volunteer to do. So you make up your mind that you're going to write this proposal. You make up your mind that you're going to work on this paper. You make up your mind you're going to serve on this committee. You decide that. And so when you're in a situation where you decide what to do, and I know some of you probably did this as undergraduates, you end up agreeing to do too much. So you're overwhelmed all the time because you've agreed you're doing too much. But that's a lot different than being overwhelmed because some company is breathing down your neck and assigning you too much stuff. It's because it's your choice. And so the other thing that's really great about being a university professor is it's your choice. Almost everything I do is my choice. Even this was my choice. I wanted free pizza. So, no. So what do professors do? We do three things. We teach, we do research, and we commit service. All right? So what are those things? Well, one of the things that I wanted to try to impress upon you is finding the right balance for these things. So this balance is different for everybody. Even in this department, which is the or top department, where everybody's doing a lot of research, the balance between teaching, research, and service is very different for each person. So finding the right level of university is a really big step for doing that, and I'll go through those different levels. And the whole thing is that you really need to be able to do multitasking, and it doesn't mean necessarily doing two different things at the same time, like eating pizza and drinking beer, which we can all do. It's more like having a lot of things to do and not being overwhelmed by facing a lot of different things to do. So what are the different types of academic posts? So let me try to go through that. And by the way, please interrupt me and ask questions. I started to say that and I forgot. Said professor has one problem in life. They start talking and they don't want to shut up. So if you want to ask a question, just throw pizza at me or something. No question? Yes. Yeah. So the question was, of course, here's this memory thing, right? Do I ever get frustrated? I'll paraphrase it. Do I ever get frustrated because I do all this research and it takes a long time before it ends up in some aerospace system? And the answer is, yeah, I would like a more immediate gratification. But where I get my immediate gratification on influence is through you. So I feel that I'm influencing you in some way. When I'm teaching a class, I'm influencing you because maybe I turn you off on the subject or maybe I turn you on to the subject. But either way, I've influenced you. I influence you because people like Aero comes and says, can I go to this meeting? And I say yes. Or Neil says, can I send all these people to the AIA meeting? And I say yes. Who did I say no to? No, it's kidding. You probably, no. So basically, your influence comes through your youthful interaction with students. That's a direct, immediate gratification. And yeah, I've written hundreds, maybe 1,000 papers. Okay, and I'll bet you I'm lucky if 5 of those are someplace in a product, we'll say. Whereas in a company, you might get immediate gratification. So you might work for SpaceX and design a widget and that gets launched in 3 days or something like that. So you might feel that more immediate gratification. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. If you want to be a professor, you can do that in a lot of different ways. Okay, if you want to be an academic, we'll say. You can do it at a community college. You can do it at a 4-year college. You can do it at a university, a Research One university like Michigan, or God forbid, Ohio State, or Notre Dame, or something like that. Those other schools, right? You can be an instructor. Many of you know. How many of you know instructors? You know who instructors are in this department? Tim Smith is an instructor. He's not a professor. Edmondson. Research faculty. You know any research faculty in this department? JP. And there's also a woman whose name just went out of my mind because she doesn't teach. Who? Erin, yes, thank you. And we might have some more. So across the street, there are like 10 or 15 research professors. Different departments have more research professors than others, it depends. ME has about 20 people who are not faculty members, who are research faculty and/or instructors. So what are the differences? Well, I just sort of laid it out in terms of teaching, service, and research. How many courses you teach, how much service you commit, and how much research you do. And that's sort of how it lays. So Research One University, it's about a third, a third, a third. You spend a third of your time teaching, a third of your time doing research, and a third of your time doing service. So any questions about that? And these are all meaningful jobs. I've graduated 62 PhD students, and about a third of them are academics. And some of them are at Research One universities, some are at four-year universities, some are at like places like Rochester Institute of Technology, Rose-Hulman, yes. Okay, so the question is, where's tenure track lie in these? Okay, instructors and research faculty are not tenure track. These people are all tenure track. Those people are tenure track, and many community college people are on contracts, I believe. I'm not quite so sure about that. Tenure is something I think will go away in your lifetime, but I'm not sure. Why do I say that? I think it's probably, you know, tenure was invented because of academic freedom. The concept that, you know, a political scientist could get up and say, I'm a Nazi and not get fired. Now we just have presidential candidates that can say that, right? So, sorry. Can you bleep that out? No, it's kidding. And that kind of situation is kind of gone. I mean, not too many people are threatened by their political views or their personal choices in life. But you know, we have it. The English don't have it. Margaret Thatcher did away with it when she was Prime Minister of England. Some universities have what are called post-tenure review now, so that if you're really incompetent, you can still get fired. But I just think society will go that way, I'm guessing. But right now it's great. I mean, I can't get fired. I have to do something really crazy to get fired. I'm capable of that, by the way, but I try to keep myself from not doing that. All right, any other questions about that? And what happens here is these people are sort of self-funded. They had to bring in the money that pays their salary. Well, that's the other thing I should point out. Okay, we should go back to this. It reminded me. Okay, these are 9-month appointments, all of them, except for this one. Okay, they're 9-month appointments. So I only get a 9-month salary. No professor gets paid more than 9 months. So then you have the 3 months of the summer. So if you're teaching in a 4-year college, you can take that off. Or you can sign up to teach summer school, which is usually a bad idea. Just because teaching is emotionally exhausting, and not teaching during the summer is a really good idea. I did it once. I taught all year round. I thought I'd die. So to cover your summer salary, you can do a lot of things. So if you're at a 4-year college or a 2-year college, you probably paint houses in the summer if you want to work, or maybe you go camping all summer. So I mean, that's a lifestyle choice, right? I mean, it might be real interesting. You might be happy teaching 4 or 5 courses a year, taking the summer off and seeing the world on your own dime. You know, that, of course, you make less money than somebody at a university, but money is not everything. Unless you're completely broke, then it's a lot. So that's something to consider as well. So at a university, you are expected to do research during the summer. It's sort of a metric. And so where do we get the money for that? We write grants. So when we write a grant, first of all, we try to get money to hire a student. And then we try to get money for equipment and supplies, and we try to get money for travel, and then we try to get money for our summer salary. And like I said, I've been doing it for 36 years. Oh, that sounds so awful. Could I change that number? Probably. Anyway, been doing it for 36 years. I've never not been able to get my summer salary through some grant process. I've never not been able to fund students. So I've been pretty lucky. So what is teaching? You likely know more about this than I do, right? You take classes. You cannot sit through a class and not think that you might do it differently if you were teaching. At some point you'll sit there and say, you know, I would have done it differently, or I would have said this, or why didn't they explain that first? You know, so you already have ideas about what you would do for teaching. One of the problems in academia is it's often viewed as the only thing we have to do by students. And that's a little bit, that can be a point of grumpiness between the students and the faculty, because it's not the only thing we do. It's also a grumpiness between us and society, because most society thinks all we do is teach. So about every 5 to 6 years, there'll be an article in the paper about why do professors get paid full-time for only teaching 3 hours a week, you know? Well, the answer is we work more than 3 hours a week. It's full of challenges, okay? And these are the challenges that I see teaching. And you might see other challenges as a teacher yourself. But it's a very interesting thing. There are people that study it. We have a department here that studies it now. There's all kinds of thoughts about how you get people to learn. But the bottom line for me is that everyone is an individual. Everyone learns differently. Everyone has a different skill set. Everyone has a different background. And so when you teach, it's very difficult to find that place where you should start, so to speak. You know, so dealing with the fact that not all students have the same background, they don't have the same skill set, those are tough things to deal with. So you kind of pick a ground and go for it. And then you try to encourage students to ask questions if they're not following the mainstream thought. That's the other thing I should put on there. Getting students to ask questions, it's always difficult. I always tell my class that you should ask any question you have. There are no stupid questions. There are only stupid answers. So if you ask a question, I'm the one's at risk, not you, right? Of course, nobody believes that. I always make that speech, and then the first person who asks a question, I always say, that's a stupid question. All right, objective grading is very difficult. Yes, sir. What is the best way to ask? The question is, what is the best way to get students to ask questions? Humor and making people feel relaxed. So if you can get your class to feel relaxed about asking questions, sometimes goading them a little bit, you know, not in a serious way, but in a friendly way, trying to draw them out. It works really well. It goes downhill with class size, let's put it that way. The bigger the class, the less likely people are to raise their hand and ask a question. It's just normal behavior. So. But that's my shot at it. There might be better ways. Other questions? Okay. Objective grading is really difficult. You know, I can look at a problem and say, okay, you forgot this term, or you divided by 2, you should have multiplied by 2, or it's always square root of 2 and pi, you know, someplace in there, right? So that stuff's easy, but then assigning a grade is really difficult. You know, what grade do you get if you had the whole philosophy of solving the problem correct, but you made a numerical error? What grade do you give if you had the first step, but you completely lost it after that? So that's I think is a difficult part about teaching. And then just realizing that grading is an imperfect measure of learning. So every year I have to hire new graduate students, for instance, or write letters of recommendation for people who graduate and go off to work, or want to go to graduate school someplace else. Why they'd want to do that, I have no idea. And so the first thing we do is we look at grades. But it's really a very imperfect measure of somebody's ability to do things. So I'll tell you a story. I had 2 students in my junior level class. Okay, one straight A's, one pretty much a B student. Both of them talked to me. Both of them wanted to work for me in the summer. I gave the straight A student a fellowship, and the B student I didn't know what to do with, but he asked really good questions in class and after class. So I hired him as an hourly wage person. So now fast forward 20 years, guess which one is the most successful? It was the B student. So see, right there is a good example of how imperfect grades are as a measure of a student's ability. So when you get that B, don't feel bad about it. So that's teaching. What's research? Wow. There are many kinds, okay? Many kinds of research. And there are many things that people call research that aren't research, but pass for it. So there's basic new discovery type research. And most of the people in this department do that kind of research. Then there's applied research, which is sort of like new designs and stuff like that. And then there's development, which is improvement on existing stuff. And this is the kind of stuff you typically do in a company. And this stuff you typically do more in government labs, and that stuff you typically do in a university. There is a great article written by Professor Bernstein on research. And if you ask him about it, he'll be so pleased. He'll send it to you. I can send it to you also, but he wrote it, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. It's a really good article about picking a dissertation topic and that sort of thing. But it has good instincts on how to do research or what research means. So really, in the end, it's you look at something and you see, you get an idea. And you know, you can get that. You can read somebody's academic paper and get an idea. You can look at somebody's design and get an idea. I mean, you've all done a little bit of it when you had your various undergraduate projects. You know, you're really working a little bit more in these areas, but you can kind of see how maybe you could come up with a research idea from that. So one of my research ideas that I'm most excited about lately is I watched birds do something. I was watching a bird fly one day. God knows why I was doing that. I was sober, so that wasn't the reason. I think I was supposed to be grading papers, and I looked out the window probably. And I noticed that when birds fly, their wings aren't straight. They're kind of a little bit curvy. So I thought, why is that? So I asked some bird biologists, and they said, we don't know. And then I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I think I'll look into that. And so I had a graduate student, Alex Pankonian, who some of you might have met before. He graduated, just got his PhD about a year ago, and now went to the Air Force labs for working on the same topic. So anyway, we just started investigating that. And now I have a 5-year grant to do that, to look at the aerodynamics of birds and how that would translate to aircraft. There's something that birds do aerodynamically that we could do better with an airfoil. So that's what happens. You just look at stuff and you think, how can you do it better? And depending upon the level at which it takes to do something better, you get one of those levels of research out of it. So what is service? Service is different levels. There's university service, okay? That's like serving on committees. So you're getting your PhD, you need a committee. And so being on that committee would be service. The chair of that committee would not be service, that would be his job. But being on the committee would be service. There's committees for promotion. There's committees for honor code violations. There's a committee for parking violations. Life is full of committees in the university. So that's service. Serving the local community. So if you do something in the local community. So AIAA student group here does a lot of service. You know, you go out and you talk to high school kids. Aero Day is a big service thing. So those are examples of service. Then the professional thing is AIAA, ASME, IEEE, have professional societies. You belong to the professional society, you get involved in it, and that's service. And it's a really good thing to do if you're going to be a faculty member, is to be involved in those committees, because that puts you in touch with your academic peers, people at government agencies who are working on similar problems, people in companies who might be interested. So I don't know, how many of you went to SciTech? I know Neil did. And, okay, so going to those kind of conferences, that's really what that kind of service is about. And they all have conferences that you can chair or be part of or chair a session. They have technical committees that you can belong to where you discuss how the technology should go at sort of a high level. So that's what service is all about. Some of it's fun, some of it's nasty. Serving on the parking committee, once somebody asked me to do that, it's the only time I said no. So if you become an academic and you go to work in a university, you'll be expected to do research. And in order to do research, you have to have money. In order to get the money, you have to write proposals. In order to write proposals, you have to have ideas. And so doing research in the academic setting requires that. It requires you to visit research labs, visit companies, and the whole trick is to align your skill set with that of the agencies and companies that want things done. So if you have, a skill set, you're really good at X, and all you need to do is figure out where that fits in somebody's problem, and you can carry on. So those are my basic comments. I'd like to ask you, or let you ask me any kind of questions. Yes, sir. So the question is supply and demand. How available are academic positions? And you're wrong. There's more than one or two. We have 5 openings in this department. Purdue has about 10 openings. So right now is a really good time because there's a lot of people like me who are old and should retire. Some of them are retiring, some are dying. So there's a lot of openings because of this age bubble. So what happened is there was kind of an even production of PhDs in academic positions till about 1982. And then Ronald Reagan got rid of mandatory retirement. And because he got rid of mandatory retirement, a lot of people, being a professor is a great job. Nobody wants to quit. So there was this like big bubble where there weren't a whole lot of job opportunities. But right now there are lots of job opportunities. So I disagree with you, there's only 1 or 2 openings. I think there are fewer people graduating with PhDs who want to be professors than there are jobs. Now the trick is finding the job that's right for you, and that's a big trick. It's hard to get an academic position because academic positions are awarded by a committee, and pleasing a committee is a difficult thing to do. So you're probably aware we've been interviewing people for a while here, and it's frustrating to get people to agree on who we should hire because everybody has a different opinion, but we'll get there. Yes? Okay, so the question is, how much does a postdoc play in? Well, it plays in a lot because if I could just hire who I wanted to hire, I would only hire people who had postdoc training first. Just because it gives me a better feeling that that person will be successful. So there's a lot of difference between somebody saying they want to be a professor and somebody who's going to be good at it. And so when you interview people, you have to, that's the game, right? It's just like recruiting graduate students. There are people who want to be my graduate student. I have to look at them and decide, are they going to be any good at it or not? And it's difficult to do. So if you've had a postdoc or you've had a previous experience in a government lab, then you're sort of intellectually more mature than somebody who just got their PhD. And maturity comes from the experience that you would get. So typically a 3-year postdoc or somebody with 3 years out of their PhD would have a better shot than somebody who just got their PhD. So of the people that have been hired here in the last 10 years or so, I believe that Vera and Fidkowski are the only ones that got hired right out of graduate school. I think everybody else had some sort of experience someplace else, either as a postdoc or as a professor at a lesser university. And the guy that's high on my list right now, of all the people we interviewed, has 3 years experience. And it's easy because I can see they're successful. So they come here, they'll be more successful because we're good. We have better students, that's why. So the question is, what's the path to becoming a faculty member? And the answer is, it's a little bit serendipitous and it's different for different people. Because when you apply for positions, you should start applying for positions when you get your PhD. And you should keep applying until you get a position. If you have, people like to see some teaching experience, but it's not necessary to have been an instructor. It's not necessary to be a postdoc, but those things would help. So there's varying ways to go through that. I got my first position right out of graduate school. The time was a little different. There weren't so many, mostly back then in the 80s, mostly math and physics people did postdocs, but not too many engineers. Now the system's changed. A lot of people do engineers. So when my PhD students finish, I hire them as a postdoc right away until they find a job. Because I know that life is funny. If you have a job, it's easier to get a job. If you have no job, it's harder to get a job. So I tell my students, I may not be able to pay you much, but I'll give you a title, and you can hang around, and I'll give you some money, and you can eat. Pizza, free pizza. No, it's kidding. And so the question is, how do you know who to work with and who to trust? And the answer is, beats me. Now, the answer is, this system of academia, academic research, 90% is based on trust. So people call me up and say, do you want to work on something together? And because I've written a lot of papers, I get a lot of emails from people that say they'd like to work with me. And you know, it's sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I think I can count on one hand at times people have taken my ideas and published them without me. You know, which, considering I've published 1,000 papers, it's not very much. It's less than 1%. So I tend to be pretty trusting. Some faculty are not. You know, some faculty are really worried and guarded about their stuff. And it depends on the organization. Biologists are terrible. They're just really very secretive. They don't want to share anything. As I'm finding out because I'm trying to work with some biologists. Intellectual property is a funny thing. So you get an idea and you have a choice. If it's a really good idea, you can keep it to yourself and try to patent it. Keep the intellectual property. Or you can write an article about it and share it with the world. I've always taken a second approach. I have probably one patent and maybe half a dozen patent applications, but mostly because my students often think they'd like to patent their idea, and I, think I should let them. But basically, I think patents are silly. I mean, if you have that one really golden idea, it's not silly, but most of the stuff we do is not going to be. So the patent I have, which was 1990, is flying in a satellite. And I got a whole $1,500 for that. On the other hand, I eventually wrote it up as a paper, and it gets cited all the time. And then it got reprinted in a volume called, something like Significant Papers or of the Era or something like that. Yes, sir. Okay, so basic research comes from essentially 4 agencies: the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Office of Naval Research, the Army Research Office, and the National Science Foundation. So they have a bunch of sub-programs depending upon the area you're in. There's a program manager. You can talk to that program manager, try try to figure out what they're interested in, and try to sell them on your idea. The National Science Foundation, you can just submit proposals to. They're less oriented in terms of what they want to fund. You just have to write a good proposal. Then you go a little level above that, or below that, however you want to call it, in terms of basic research, but more applied research. Then there's DARPA. There's the Air Force Research Laboratories. There's the Army Research Laboratories and the Naval Research Laboratories. And those are different from those other agencies I mentioned, but they also fund work at universities, but it's more applied. Then companies have most big companies have what are called IR&D budgets, which are called, I stands for Internal Research and Development Funds, okay? So a percentage of their profits go into this fund, and they use that fund to generate new ideas. And so that's a source of money. Sometimes they want very specific things, and they go and look for very specific people in universities who are doing those very specific things. Then there are a bunch of foundations. Oh yeah, I forgot about the National Institutes of Health, which also funds basic research. Not so much aerospace, but... Okay, so let me try to explain it. The issue is, if I have a grant that lasts a finite amount of time, and then later on I keep working on it after the time is over, and I decide to invent something, or I create some intellectual property out of it, what happens? Well, this is what happens. If you try to apply for a patent, then the patent people will ask you if there was any federal funding involved. And so you have to declare that. And then I don't think it necessarily means you're giving up anything. It just depends on how close your patent application is to what you were paid to do on your research contract. So there's sort of an intellectual decision about it had a lot to do with it or it had nothing much to do with it. It just happened to be in the same area. So it's kind of a lawyer call. Other questions? Well, thanks for listening. And my email's on one of those, well, you know how to get a hold of me. If you have questions, don't hesitate to email me and I'll forward it to a graduate student to answer. No, I won't answer it. The original flight, the Wright brothers flight, didn't have conventional flaps. It had a wing twist phenomena. So the wings were very lightweight and they twisted them to get flight control.